UMass Boston, and we have a certificate program and master's degree to prepare people for CADIS certification eligibility through ACVREP. So if anyone's interested in that, please let me know. I'm happy to talk. We do have a new cohort that will be starting in the fall, so the deadline is June 1st if anyone's interested in that. On this screen, I have there is a QR code to the survey. I have posted it. I'm going to post it once more just in case we had any latecomers. It looks like we have 104 joining us. I know sometimes we seem to be having more internet connectivity issues these days than in the past. More people are using computers and devices in ways that you know, I think it's overwhelming a lot of the networks. I think that's probably what Andrea is dealing with. I'm going to just bring up the survey. Let's see, we have 67 responses. We'll come back to that in just a moment. So those of you, I see Krista Boger, woohoo, Caddis, yes. She said you won't be disappointed. Thank you, Krista. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it back over to Sherry so she could tell you a little bit about FIMC-VI.
Absolutely. So we are the Florida Instructional Materials Center for the Visually Impaired. We are a statewide resource center. We provide accessible instructional materials throughout the state. We are an ex officio for the American Printing House for the Blind. We offer professional development in a wide range of areas, such as local and statewide workshops. We host 2 Working with the Experts, which we are in right now. And we have webinars throughout the year. We also offer quality programs for visually impaired on an individual basis with counties throughout the state. We host statewide student events such as the Florida Regional Braille Challenge. There are 4 of those, the Florida Cane Quest, and Florida Festival of Families. We also provide Florida standardized assessments in accessible materials such as Braille and large print. And we also help coordinate volunteer services for Braille throughout the state. So in order to contribute to our conversation today, everybody's mics are muted at this time. Also, video is out. It helps us with the connectivity issues. But we would like you to contribute using your chat box. You need to make sure that all panelists and attendees are selected in the bottom right corner using the down arrow. Otherwise, it will just go to the panelists. Either way is fine, but if you'd like everybody to see it, please change your settings. And you can also raise your hand during any session by pushing Alt and Y at the same time. Towards the end, I believe Rachel's going to be taking questions and answers.
Control Y, Control Y.
Sorry, Control Y.
On a Windows computer.
On a Windows computer. And thank you, Rachel. And at the end,
sorry,
I believe
it says Alt Y. Am I wrong?
It says Alt Y. I don't know.
I think it's.
But
okay.
You can also just click and unclick. At the end, Rachel will be taking questions, and at that time, we will open up your mics so that you can ask them directly to her.
We have a few people raising their hands.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to have to,
I think.
Let me get into participants. I have to get in to see who.
Harriet and Teresa.
Teresa and Harriet. If you could put your questions in the chat box.
Oh, they're just testing.
They're just testing. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so there will be handouts and in-service credits given. Handouts for this webinar, and I know this is one of the questions that was already posed in the chat box, but handouts for this webinar will be available for download at our website, and the link is there. For CEUs, you must complete the survey at the end and use the opening and closing codes. If you have any questions about that, please email Andrea Wallace. She is handling all questions about CEUs. And there will also be a survey link at the end. This is required for CEUs, but we would like everybody that's participating to fill out the survey. That's how we get excuse me, information for the state. We are state funded on a grant basis, and we provide that feedback information to the state. So everybody hopefully will just take a few minutes to complete the survey at the end.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sherry.
You're welcome.
And I think Andrew's gonna hopefully try. She's having she just texted me. She's having a really bad outage in her area for internet connectivity, so she's gonna try to join by phone. Want to talk briefly about the opening code. Yes, Sherry, do you have that? Oh, unmute.
Give me just 1 second, Rachel. Yeah. I have to look it up, and I will post it in the chat box.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Looks like
Liz did.
Elizabeth.
Yes, it's modifier. The opening code is modifier. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Francesca asked about in-service points, and I believe, Sherry, they complete the same survey for the in-service points for TVIs through Florida State.
Yep. Use the opening and closing codes and complete the survey, and they can get in-service points. Oh, and Andrea's here. Yay.
She made it. I'm going to post the link one more time because we're going to go over the results in just a moment. So if anyone hasn't completed that survey, you have a couple more moments to do that. That's the survey. The survey I'm posting is not for in-service. This is the survey that we're just using to share the results for what input you use for computing devices. So it's a one-question survey. If you haven't done that, you got a few more minutes to do that now. Welcome, Andrea. So our learning objectives are to describe at least 3 benefits of incorporating keystrokes into mainstream technology curriculum. And that could be across the spectrum of ages and programs. And to identify at least 10 keyboard commands, we're going to talk about much more than 10, and methods for accessing the Windows 10 start screen, taskbar, system tray, which is really now called the notification area, and the desktop. And someone hopefully is going to monitor questions as we go. And we will pause for questions. We're going to take a break and not go 2 hours straight. We're going to pause, and then we're going to have some hands-on experiences. I know Andrea included some information in the handouts that said if you were able to download at least a demo of JAWS, if not the full version. You don't necessarily have to have JAWS on, but we are going to be exploring navigating in keyboard, in dialog boxes using keyboard commands. And I'm going to use the free HJPad word processor that comes pre-installed with JAWS, so we'll be exploring that together. The last objective is to discuss at least 30 keyboard commands and alternate methods of navigating in productivity software to access menus, ribbons, dialog boxes, as well as the general interfaces for Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And for this session, we are focusing on Windows. Some of the keyboard commands are similar or work in different operating systems. In a session that we'll go over tomorrow, we're going to talk about some built-in accessibility features. So I will talk briefly about some of the hotkeys that are specific to the different magnification and screen reading programs on different operating systems. So common keyboard commands, we're going to talk about those. I'm going to flip over. Let's see where we are in our survey. So the question was, what is your primary mode of input for computing technology commands? And it looks like we have, let me move this over so I can see the results here. For keyboard commands using a physical keyboard, it looks like we have, oh, it's still changing. We have 81 responses. So right now it's 23.5%. 19 people use primarily keyboard commands using a physical keyboard. For mouse clicks and commands using a mouse or similar device, that was, it looks like that's about 30, it just went slightly down, about 30.5%. And right now it's 25 people. The combination of 2 or more input methods, that is about 46%, 45, 46%. Looks like a few more people are filling out the survey. And Braille commands, we don't have any primary Braille users, but there, let's see. We have one person that added a comment that says they've acquired a Braille display for a student, and they're hoping to work with him on it next school year. And even if you have a Braille keyboard, you can still use the QWERTY keyboard and go back and forth, so you don't have to rely on just one input method. Feel free to keep adding to that. Let's come back to, there we are. So there's many, we're going to focus on common keyboard commands, just a little background so you know where this session originally came from. I was presenting at ATIA several years ago, and I actually hadn't, I think I only submitted one session, and I was going to leave it at that, but Microsoft was asking for a unique Microsoft session, and I was hearing from a lot of people that they just didn't feel comfortable with basic keyboard commands. And one thing that I always tend to feel, especially when I'm working with a student and they're having a tech issue and we need to contact tech support, unless we're contacting someone who's specifically familiar with keyboard commands, often they'll say click here, click there, you know, or touch the screen here. So I you know, and many of you may have feel like this too, but especially for novice user and who's learning a screen reader, I tend to feel like a translator, converting those mouse keystrokes into, or mouse commands into keyboard commands. So that's really where this overall presentation originated, and I have modified it for this session. So we looked at, we already looked at that survey. I have a warning here. And this is a quote from Grace 2014. I have that link shared if anyone's interested in this article. But the quote is, learning and using keyboard shortcuts will drastically impact your relationship with your mouse and greatly improve your experience on a computer. So I find, you know, for the most part, as long as something's accessible, my hands rarely leave the keyboard. I tend to use my mouse very infrequently. When I'm teaching students, especially screen reader students, or even students who have low vision using magnification software, if they're more familiar with using the mouse as they're learning keyboard commands, I recommend you gradually, before you touch the mouse, if you ask yourself, can I do this without using the mouse? Then it helps them transition, even if gradually, as they're learning new commands, so they're not reliant on that mouse as much. For students who can't use the mouse, or who need full keyboard access, they don't have that, so you don't necessarily have to help them break that habit, but they still need to learn the keyboard commands to navigate. Some benefits of keyboard commands. So this is really for everyone, not just people with vision loss, but really across the board, I think, for everyone. Of course, the first one is accessibility. We're able, if you're able to use keyboard commands, you have full access to what you need to do without having to rely on a mouse or visual applications. Of course, this requires that the applications you're using are keyboard accessible, and that can be an issue if there's a website or an application that is not keyboard accessible. So you want to make sure that whatever products you're recommending that your district purchase or your agency purchase, you want to make sure that those are accessible. Another benefit to keyboard commands is often quicker. If I know a keyboard command to most things, you know, some people will challenge and say, well, I could do that faster with the mouse, but if you know keyboard commands often, your hands are already on the keyboard typing anyway, so you don't have to lift your hand, go to the mouse, and come back. So I do find for many tasks, it's often quicker to use the keyboard. Your hands stay on the home row, so if you know how to touch type, or if your students know how to touch type, your hands are able to stay on the home row, and you're able to do those keyboard commands from the home row. And it also could help to avoid repetitive injuries. Now, of course, you want to make sure that your students and you are using proper ergonomics. You're sitting properly. Right now, you can't see my legs. I do have my leg up on my chair, which is not good ergonomics, but you want to make sure they're sitting straight up in the chair, feet on the ground. And also, I have a wrist pad that I use for the keyboard. That definitely helps. I'm on the computer or technology pretty much nonstop throughout the day. So you want to make sure that they're taking those precautions. But just using a keyboard because you're not having to go back and forth can help to avoid those injuries. And I have another article that it's keyboard shortcut usage article, that keyboard usage is contagious. So introducing, and these are just two characters that I found from the built-in PowerPoint slides a few years ago when I did a similar presentation at ATIA. This is just a clip art that shows it's a little cartoon picture of a mouse and keyboard. So just basically the idea is we're just basically having the mouse say one thing and then the keyboard is translating it into something else. So if you think about how you do things or how you're working with your students, or if you're talking to tech support and they say click here or do this, try to think about how would you or your students translate that and into using keyboard commands. And of course, this session is focused on using the QWERTY keyboard, but you could just as easily convert that into Braille commands or using other inputs. So first, some terminology. The taskbar, I'm gonna see if I'm sharing my whole screen. Sherry or Andrea, could you just verify you could see my start menu opened?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
can see
Okay.
your perfect.
Okay, so I just hit the Windows key to open the start menu, and the taskbar, right, that bar at the bottom, if you didn't know, that's called the taskbar. And then on the taskbar from left to right is on Windows, and it will depend on how you have it set up, because you could actually enable and disable certain areas. So you may have more areas than I have listed, but typically from the left, you have your start button, your quick launch area. Over to the right, you have open applications. So you can see I have a number of applications open, my inbox for Outlook, I have Chrome, I have a folder for FIMC, my PowerPoint presentation slide that's showing, and Zoom. So I have all of those open applications. And then all the way on the right is the notification area, which some of you may know as the system tray. Again, on different operating system, these things are called something slightly different, but and of course Mac has a dock, so it has a different structure for their desktop compared to other operating systems. I have a picture here of the Windows desktop. So this is basically just showing the same things that I went over. The desktop area is where you have your icons, and then over on the left, start button, quick launch, your open application, and then notification area. So I have many different ways of getting to all of these different components. First, it's important to talk about modifier keys, and you heard, that was that magic word at the beginning of this, and this is the reason. When someone's doing keyboard commands, the most important thing, and it seems obvious maybe for some of you, but when someone's first learning how to do keyboard commands, you never want them to take two fingers and press down together on two keys or three keys. Maybe they'll get it, but it's not going to be consistent. So you always want to be aware of which key or keys are the modifier keys in a single command. Again, don't hold down all those keys at the same time. So you would hold down the modifier key and then tap the other key in the command. So if the command was Control O, I would hold down Control and tap O. Think about how you hold down Shift. Anyone who's a touch typist has learned this, and they learn it early on in typing, right? Pretty much after you learn your home row, you start learning those shift keys. That's usually the next thing that you tend to learn. So even if someone hasn't gone very far in learning to touch type, they should at least have those down. And if you just explain this to your students, just like you hold down your shift key, most students will have a light bulb that goes off, again, whether they're young students or adults, just relating it. So the other keys that are modifier keys are Shift, of course, Control, Windows, Alt, and then with AT software, sometimes, now caps lock is not typically a modifier key, but when I'm using a screen reader like JAWS or NVDA, I could turn caps lock into a modifier key. If you're using Zoom text, caps lock becomes the Zoom text key. It also magic, it would be the magic key. If with some you are able to switch which the special key is for the AT software. Insert, again, wouldn't typically be a modifier key, but when you're using most of the Windows screen readers, insert often is a special key for JAWS or NVDA. So if I had a command that was Control Shift up arrow, I would hold down Control and Shift, in this case with my left hand, and I would tap up arrow with my right hand. So you want to make sure you're just aware of the single command and holding those modifier keys down first. So desktop navigation. If I wanted to get to the desktop, there's a couple ways. Some people, I have hold down Windows and hit M. and I do have it spelled out here for you. You could also list the command as just simply Windows M, but because Windows is a modifier key on Windows computers, you hold that down and tap the letter M. Some people do use Windows with the letter D. I want to talk about that, just that there's a difference. There's nothing wrong with using either, but it's important to understand what happens when you do Windows M. I could do Windows M as many times, well, I think right now, because I'm focused on the slideshow, it won't do it here. But I could do Windows M as many times as I want. No matter how many times I do it, it's going to focus on the desktop. The drawback is if I'm using a screen reader, typically the first time I do that, I'm going to hear desktop and I'm going to hear the icon I'm focused on. The next time I do it, I typically will not hear anything. It will be silent. So some students, you just need to explain that if you do Windows M and you don't hear anything, you're already focused on the desktop. If you do Windows D, that's a toggle. That one will let me do it from here. So if I do Windows D, it took me to the desktop. And if I do it again, it toggles back to where I was. So they both work and they're good commands to be aware of, but it's important if you're teaching both or one to understand how they work and the difference. So for most of my students, it's a little confusing for them to hit Windows D and then jump to something else because they hit it twice and they're not on the desktop. So I tend to teach Windows M, but for a more advanced student that understands, they may benefit from knowing both. Once I go to the desktop, I could use my arrow keys, and it's basically just moving up and down between those icons, left, right, since it's a grid. I'm just moving around those icons. I can also do first letter navigation. So if I went back to the desktop, I have zoom text on there. So if I hit Z, it just jumped me to zoom text. I don't have a screen reader talking right now. We'll have one on a little later, but I'll explain what's happening. So I could hit D, say for documents. If I had Mozilla Firefox and it was listed with Mozilla first, I would hit M. If it was listed on the desktop as just Firefox, of course, I would just hit F. And you want to keep hitting the letter once at a time to move between icons. That's called first letter navigation, which, by the way, the desktop is a list. So later on when we talk about different control types, just know that the desktop, the reason we're able to use the arrow keys and this first letter navigation is because it's a list. And so if you're in a dialog box and you have a list, these same rules apply for any list, whether it's the desktop or a list of documents in the documents folder. And enter would open the selected icon. So if I wanted to open an item, I could do Windows D in this case. I could go up to zoom text, and if I were to hit enter here, zoom text would open. Okay, so to click to switch apps, right? So if someone said, okay, click on the bottom and switch between the open applications on that quick launch, that would be a way that someone would use a touch screen or a mouse to switch between apps. If I wanted to do that with keyboard commands, I would do a special command. And I say special because this command is one where you actually want to hold down the modifier key and keep it down. Most commands you don't want to do that, but in this case I would want to hold down Alt, not let it go, and then I would tap the Tab key once at a time to switch between programs. And the reason why, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm just going to hold down Alt, hit Tab, and let go. And what that did was it toggled me to the last program. Now if I do it again, it just toggles back. So that's useful because I'm able to just quickly go between the last two programs. But I have a lot of different applications running right now, and I would never be able to get to all of those other application windows if I held down Alt, hit Tab, and let go each time. So to toggle between all the applications, I have to hold down Alt, tap Tab one at a time. My other finger is still on the Alt key. And then when I get back to where I want to be, I let go of Alt. So I'm able to navigate and switch between all open applications. Screen readers, especially JAWS, you have special hotkeys also to get to open applications. So there's special dialog boxes that you could get to, but these are purely Windows commands. So it doesn't matter what screen reader, what screen magnification program you're using. All of these that I'm talking about here are all Windows commands. So like I said, so I held down Alt, in this case with my right hand. With my left hand, I tap Tab with my left pinky, and then when I got to the program I wanted, I let go of Alt. Some tips for toggling. The quick Alt, right? So if I just did Alt Tab, that just gets back and forth between the last two, which again could be very useful if someone doesn't want to go between all applications and just quickly between the last two. Open applications look like page tabs. So if you have a student with low vision, to describe it, you could just explain it like that. Those windows at the bottom next to the quick launch, they just look like little page tabs. And think of it as an alternate way to tab between open apps. So if you help your students, I find that that helps them remember it if you just tell them it's an alternate way to tab between open apps. Taskbar navigation. So the taskbar, like I said, includes the quick launch, open applications. If I do a Windows T, it just quickly, so I saw my, my taskbar popped up at the bottom. And if I had a screen reader, I would have heard that I was focused on my Log Me and Rescue icon, which I have there in my first position. That's a remote program that I use. And from there, I could tab between the different options. I'm going to do Windows T again. I could tab and it moved me over to my notification area. And then if I hit tab again, it just moved me out. Now, if I go back to Windows T, if I want to move between the items in this particular area, I could just use right arrow and left arrow. And then when I tab to notifications, I could use right and left. So tab just moves you between the different areas of the taskbar, and your arrow keys right and left will move you between each item on the area you're focused on. And enter or space, most of the time enter would be fine. On the notification area, sometimes you may want to do something other than hitting enter. I think there's a, yes, Jeffrey asked a question about the PowerPoint, and I know Andrea wasn't here at the beginning, so she didn't say this. Andrea, there's a, the link is available on the FIMC website. She would have kept us on track. Yes, it is there. They just shared that link. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So the PDF is available and it is fully accessible, so you're able to access that. Sorry, that's one of the things Andrea would have mentioned before we got started. So glad I peeked over there, Jeff. The quick launch buttons. This is a really great way for you to quickly launch applications. So for a lot of my students, you could set up shortcuts in a number of different ways, but I find, especially with Windows 10, it's a great way of pinning an item to that taskbar, and then they could launch it. So if I went back to my taskbar here, if I were to do a Windows 1, it would open Log Me In because it's in that first position. So if I just did Windows 1, there's my Log Me In. I'm not gonna log in right now, but that's my remote program. So if you need to give just the fastest way to quickly get to the most recent, the most important programs they need to access, then you could set that up for them and pin those items. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. I still say the system tray, it's just a habit, but it is called the notification area. And it's called something slightly different on each operating system. But that's that area down on the far right, just to the left of the time on that taskbar. And that will list programs running in the background. So volume, network connections, antivirus software, your clock, and anything else that's running in the background that you need to have access, Bluetooth and so forth. And you can adjust what's visible in that area by going to the settings for the notification area. So Windows with B is a hotkey. Now you saw we could quickly do Windows T, and I could tab over to notifications. So that's one way to get there. But I have a quick Windows hotkey that I could just do Windows B, and it gets me right to that notification area. And then I could use right and left to move between each items. So each of the items there. If I hit enter, it typically will open and focus on the item. Sometimes you may need to go to the context menu, like a right click. So I hit the applications key there. And if you don't have an applications key, which most people don't know whether they have one or not, if you have a standard QWERTY keyboard with 4 keys to the right of the space bar, it typically would be Alt, Windows, Applications, Control. If you don't have that applications key, it typically would look kind of like a little drop-down menu with sometimes there's an arrow on it, depending on the visual icon. If you don't have one, you can still get to it. It's Shift F10. So regardless of whether you have it or not, Shift F10 will get you there if you don't. So arrow right and left moves between items on that system tray notification area. And enter would typically be the same as a left click. And your applications key would typically be the same as a right mouse click. I say typically because things sometimes are a little odd, and sometimes there's an app that Enter does something that may not be quite as expected. But most of the items that would be in there, Enter would be like a left click, and the application key would be like a right click. You do have to manually focus on the item first. That's the key. The start screen navigation. So if I were to open the start menu, it's just the Windows key. And if I hit Windows again, it closes. And it puts me back to where I focus. So sometimes someone will be doing a command and they accidentally hit the Windows key. I could hit escape. If I hit escape though, I'm still, well, because I'm in a slide presentation, it's functioning a little different than it typically would. But if I hit escape, typically it's still focused on the keyboard focus tends to stay on the start button. So if you just hit the Windows key again, it closes. Once I'm in the start menu by hitting the Windows key, I'm just hitting down arrow and I can move between items. If I want to get to the right area, I would hit tab, and then I could use my arrow keys to go between those Metro style icons. And then I could tab again. And I shift tab back from that first list, and it moved me to that little line. There's a few buttons there on the left that have a button to get to my account, and settings and power off. Oops, I think I just stopped that slideshow. Let me get that back. There we go. Okay. So to search from the start menu, you could just start typing. And this is one of the features I've loved. This really, it's Windows 7. You could just go to the start menu, and if I wanted to search for an application, I typed an S there. Let's say I wanted to find Word. If I just start typing Word, it put focus right on Microsoft Word. If I want to look for a document, let's see, FIMC. I'm getting some of the presentations for this conference. So you're able to quickly pull up information about applications on your computer, documents, folders, and I could even type a web address. I would have to do like the full address, not necessarily type http://, but I would have to put it in the form of a web address. So let's say I wanted to do www.google.com. And then if I hit enter here, it's going to open up with my default browser. So I have, again, you could search for documents, programs. I didn't mention settings, which is something I use very frequently. Rather than go to settings and have to navigate, I just find it's quicker. If I wanted to get, say, to sound settings, I could just come in here, type sound, and I down arrow to sound, and it opened up my sound settings. So very quick way to get to settings. If I wanted to look up accessibility or narrator settings, I could just quickly go in and type and navigate that way. And enter to open, right? If you're focused on a menu item, typically enter would be what you would hit to open. You would use your applications key if you want to get to that context menu for that specific item that you're focused on. Using the keyboard to shut down is actually quite easy. I know when they took that start menu away in Windows 8, it was a nightmare for a lot of people, but really for people who knew keyboard commands, it wasn't a big deal. If they understood how to shut down without getting to that shutdown box. If I do a Windows M or a Windows D to go to the desktop, I could do Alt F4. It takes me right to that shutdown box. We could also set up computers in power settings so that it goes, when you hit the power button, it turns off and it goes through a proper shutdown. So you could set that up right under the power options. So to shut down, I have Windows M. Again, you could do Windows D. And then Alt F4. So again, Alt is the modifier key. You'll hold that down, tap F4. And that's the command to close. Don't do that command now. You'll exit out of Zoom. We don't want to do that. But Alt F4 would get to the shutdown if you're focused on the desktop. And you have options in that box. So if I went back there, I did Windows D, Alt F4, and then I'm in that box. I have shutdown, restart. Those are the other options because I have sleep disabled on my computer. Like there was a question there. I've been teaching Windows X and then U, like either one. Yep, that works too. So Windows X is a great tool. You know, I don't know why that I have that in here, but this gets you to a really powerful area If you do Windows X on your computer, you could explore, but this gives you a quick way to get to Power Options, Event Viewer, System, the Run Dialog box, and so much more. There's a question, Control F4. Would that close a program? Yes and no. Control F4 closes a child window. So if it's the only window you have open for a program, it will close the program. If you have multiple windows open, it's only going to close that one child window. Control F4 would not close it would not shut the computer down. Alt F4, but you have to be focused on the desktop. You can also set the computer to power off, like I said, from Power Options, and we got that quick shortcut Windows X, and then you could go into Power Options right from there. And I'm not going to go deep into it, but if you would actually have to go to Power Options. From there, there's a way to get to Advanced Controls, and that takes you to the Control Panel Power Options. Closing applications. Don't do this now. I already said the command, but Alt F4. And yes, Control F4 will close a child window, so there's nothing wrong with that. If I was focused on, well, I know I have a whole bunch of page tabs open right now. I'm focused on Chrome, and this was the survey results from the voice assistant survey that I'm focused on. So if I do Control F4, I'm going to close that child window, which is that page tab. Where if I did Alt F4, I don't want to do that now, it would close the entire browser application, including all three page tabs that I have open. So Microsoft Office, where are we on time? Good. Okay, so Microsoft Office file menu, Backstage view, and in the Microsoft, so if someone said to click on File or Backstage view, most people don't use the term Backstage view, but that's the screen that I have in display right now. So if you were in Microsoft Word and you did Alt F, it would take you to the screen where on the left we have Info, New, Open. Depending on the version you have, you may have different options, but then on the right, I'm focused on Info, so it has my options to protect document, inspect document, and then over to the right, it has my properties. If I was focused on New or Open, it would give me different options. This screen is called Backstage View. Looks like there's, did I say Windows File? File Explorer. So it used to be called Windows Explorer. It's now called File Explorer. If you're going to the file management system in Windows, but Windows Explorer is what it used to be, which was great because it's Windows E, by the way, to get there. But File Explorer is where you would go now in Windows 10. File menu navigation. So if I do from Word, if I do an Alt F, seeing some questions pop up. Oh, I think there's some mistyping there. Alt F would open up the file menu. And then from there, I could do up and down arrows, and then tab to move between each section, and then arrow to move within a section. So I know that sounds a little complicated, but I'm just going to go to Word here. And so if I went to the file menu with an Alt F, it just opens up that Backstage view. And then if I go down to Save As, Info, and then I could tab through the different options, and it's just navigating. So you're able to get around and do it fully with keyboard commands. And that will work from not just Word, but all of the essential Office applications, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, you're able to navigate to the file menu, Outlook, OneNote, any other application that has a file menu or a menu system. If it's not Alt F, typically Alt would get you to the menu ribbon or menu bar, and then you're either able to navigate with arrows or tab. Depends on whether it's a classic style menu, which typically you would just use your arrow keys, or if it's a newer ribbon style menu, you typically would use your arrows and then the tab key. So I'm going to go through this kind of quick, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the common control key commands for Microsoft Office, and most of these apply to Word, apply more to Word. So to select all is Control A. For bold is Control B. Copy, Control C. Find would be Control F. And so that would work in most Office applications, but if I was in Outlook, for example, and I did Control F, that's the command to forward a message. So it's not, like I said, universal. These are primarily for Microsoft Word, and these will work in Excel or PowerPoint. But if you're dealing with OneNote or Outlook, some of the commands might be slightly different. To italicize is Control-I. And hopefully you get the pattern here. It's typically the first letter up until, of course, the one I'm on now, which is insert hyperlink, and that's K, I believe, because the other letters were already taken with other commands. A new file would be Control-N, and now if you start Word, it automatically goes to a new file anyway, but if you needed to start a new one, it's just Control-N. Some Office control keys continued, so print, typically Control-P, save, a quick save would be Control-S, and that's if it's already, you know, if you do Control-S and if it doesn't have a name, it's going to still take you to the save dialog, but I tend to use Control-S to do a quick save. I prefer using F12. Let's see if I still have that Word document open. So F12 gets me to the save dialog box. So if you needed to change something where you needed to change the name or the location, F12 I find works a bit better. It will avoid going, especially if you go to the file menu and go down to save, you're going to get to that Backstage view and it's just hard to navigate and unnecessarily time consuming, I find. So F12 is to save and Control F12 is to open. I do have those a little further on. Underline would be Control U. It looks like Teresa says she likes F12 too. I agree. Paste, it's not Control P typically because that's for print. So Control V is to paste. And I have a slide a little further on that has copy, cut, paste. They're right next to each other. To close a window, and this is a child window, is Control W. Sometimes Control F4 will work. Other times you need to do Control W. In some cases, you could do either or. Cut would be Control X. Think of a pair of scissors, like you have the pair of scissors open, right? Would just look like an X, blade of scissors. Redo would be Control Y. So if you undo something and you go, oops, you could do Control Z, but you could also redo with Control Y. Or if you do something, let's say you paste text and you want to redo it, or if you do a certain, I use this more if I format text in a certain way and then I want to redo it, I could select other text and just do a Control Y and it'll apply whatever changes I made just a moment ago. If you do anything else though in between, Control Y won't work. It will just redo the last action. And undo is Control Z. Z is in zebra. So undo, cut, copy, paste. I promised that I had a slide here, and it's just basically a close-up of the keyboard showing ZXCV with the Control Windows Alt key on the left side of a keyboard. And basically, so ZXCV with Control is undo, cut, copy, paste. So if you have trouble remembering which one does which, just know they're right there. They're all together. So Control Z is undo, Control X is cut, Control C is copy, and Control V is to paste. And yeah, don't forget Control Y to redo. No, that's not right. Or undo and undo.
Rachel,
yeah.
There's a question. Do you have a mini handbook cheat sheet with all of these commands? That would be amazing.
This PDF is available to it right on the FIMC website. So I hope you use this as a resource. The function key, and I put it into an accessible PDF rather than sharing the PowerPoint just because I thought that would be a little more universal. Andrea has access to the PowerPoint. I don't mind if you share that as well if it's easier on the website, but the PDF has everything that the PowerPoint has. Some function keys for Office that are helpful. F1 is for help. F6 moves between different areas of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You know, often when I'm talking to people about this, I'm going to go back to my main PowerPoint window to show you. But Tab will only move me if I use Tab in this window. I have my phone attacking me. Hold on. If I use the Tab, well, you know, it might not let me. Yeah, it will let me. Okay. So if I use Tab from here while I'm focused on the outline view, it right here, it's only moving between the area that I'm focused on. So if I do a Shift F6, I have too many windows open here. I'm going to do Shift F6 again. It's basically, so there it moved me to notes, and it moved me to my menu ribbon, and I believe, yep, it moved me down there to the status bar. It's probably a little hard to see, but it's focused on that bottom bar of the window, and it's back to that object view. And it's basically just moving between all the different areas of the window. I'm able to get to my outline view and everything. So F6 and Shift F6, especially in Office applications, will move you between all of the different components of the window, where if you do Tab and Shift Tab, it's not necessarily going to move you to every component. So if Tab and Shift Tab works to get where you want to go, that's great, but just know F6 and Shift F6 are a bit more powerful. Looks like there was a question maybe. Okay, I'm going to save that for, yeah. Can you remind me to talk about that, Andrea?
You got it.
Okay. So F7 is for spell check. Again, not fully universal, but in most of the, especially in Word and PowerPoint, that will start spell check. F10 will get to the menu bar. It's just, instead of hitting Alt, F10 is another way of getting to that menu ribbon. F12, that Save As dialog, that's one of my favorites. And Control F12 gets you to the open dialog. You know, I used to teach people, and I still will, if someone needs to know how to open files right from Word or Excel, but I find it's just easier to teach people to go to the File Explorer. I did a Windows E there, and to open it, you have access to all the folders and areas connected to your device, and you could navigate right in there. So I find it's easier to open files that way than to open within the applications. Personal preference, a more advanced user probably will need to know both, but especially for a beginner learning to use a screen reader or keyboard commands, it's just easier to show them in the File Manager or File Explorer, and that would go across for different operating systems as well. We're going to take a break here in about 8 minutes. So a few tips I want to talk about for Word. Control, so to center, left, right, and justify text. So this would be particularly important for students needing to make sure that their formatting is correct, or for people that are employed and they need to make sure their documents are properly justified. Control with E for center, Control with L for left align, Control with R for right align, and Control with J for justified. Not too many people use justified, but if there's certain requirements for formatting for newsletters or something like that, Control with J will justify. It's not as easy to visually see, so I would recommend using left align when possible, but there may be some requirements to have justified text. So it's important that your students know how to do that. Bold, underline, italic, Control B, Control U, Control I. Those three are toggle commands. So you do Control B, bold on, bold off. Now you would either have to have text selected if the text was already typed before you do the command, or just know that it only affects the cursor and beyond until you turn it off. And that's important to teach when you're teaching these commands, because if you do Control B, it's not going to magically make any previous text select if that's not selected bold. You would have to first select that text. The font dialog, this is one of my students that I worked with years ago. She was trying to figure out how to remember Control with D for font. It's not Control F, since that's the find command. So she said, oh, I got it, decor. I'm going to remember it this way. And that just stuck with me. I wish I could remember who it was. It was more years ago than I'd like to admit, but that just stuck with me. So if you think of D for the decor of the document, that's a pretty powerful tool. It won't work in PowerPoint, but if I go to Word and do Control D, it gets me to that font dialog. So just a quick way, and from here I'm able to tab through and make changes. So PowerPoint editing, I just have some tips. I'm not going to go very deep into this. I already showed you I could tab between the different slide elements. So when I'm focused on those slides, tab will move me between the different objects on a slide. And enter will let me to interact with whatever object I'm focused on. And escape will stop interacting. So I'm able to, if I were to hit tab here, I'm focused on Office control keys. If I hit enter, it's going to let me edit that text. I'm just moving my arrow keys. If I hit escape, it exits to the object level, and then I could tab to the different objects on that slide. When I'm showing a slideshow, F5 is just a quick way to start the slideshow. And if you have students using refreshable Braille, highly recommend they have that connected because they could also use Braille commands to navigate, and they could read, so that way they don't have to have the screen reader talking to them at the same time, especially if you have a proficient Braille reader. Escape will exit from the slideshow, and space and backspace will move forward or backwards. A few tips for Excel. I'm not going to go into very deep ones. You can navigate in Excel and use most modern screen readers to get around, get all the information you need, as long as the file is accessible. But there are things that students can learn to do to make those more accessible. F2 will rename a cell and allow you to edit. Shift with F11 will insert a new worksheet. So if you need to insert a new worksheet into the same file, that would be the command. And then you would type the name of it. To switch between worksheets, very simple, just control page up or control page down. So if I hold down control and page up, page down, I'm gonna open Excel real quick just to show you. We'll just go, so, there we go. Should see that. So I'm gonna do a shift F11. And then if I do control, so I'm focused on sheet 2, and I did control page down, focused on sheet 1, and back to sheet 2. I don't have anything there, but all it's doing is at the very bottom, it's just, I could see it's toggling. Since I'm in a document that doesn't have anything, it's brand new, there's nothing exciting to see. But if you have someone that has multiple sheets in a worksheet, they're able to just quickly get around between those different worksheets. To collapse or expand a ribbon, control with F1. I really like this. This is a great visual tool. So right now in Word, my menu ribbon is not taking up that space. I could just do control F1 and it brings it down. It's basically just the lower ribbon beneath that top ribbon. This is more of a visual thing. It doesn't really affect keyboard commands, but for students with low vision that want more space to see what they're working on, it gives them that. Microsoft Office ribbons. Again, alternate way to get to the menu ribbon, just simply hit the Alt key. And then right and left arrows move between those main menus at the top. That quick access toolbar is pretty powerful. If I hit Alt here to go to the menu, I could do a Shift tab and it moves me up to that top area. And I'm able to actually add things. So if I want to shortcut to something, I'm not going to show you that. It's a bit more advanced, but I'm able to go under File and Options, and I can actually add things to that quick access toolbar. So if there's a more advanced function that someone needs to get to, and it's quicker just to put there, then you could give them a quicker way to access those special functions. They can still get to it through the menu ribbon, but sometimes, if they just need a quick shortcut, that's a great tool. And then you could also tab between the lower menu ribbons. So if I hit Alt to get to File, let's go to Alt H to open a home, and then I could tab between all the lower ribbons. It moved me to the font name, font size, and I'm just going basically between all the different buttons, bold, underline, italic. So I can get to everything this way too, but if there's certain hotkeys that are quicker, of course, that will be easier for your students. And then the lower ribbon, after hitting Alt, tab to an item, typically you would hit Enter to select it if it's a button. And I'm going to go into a little more depth in the next section where we're going to talk. I think I just hit my End key. Hold on, let's see where we were. I'm going to do a find. So I did Control F. I found my lower ribbon. And I'm going to do an Alt S C, by the way, to quickly go right to that slide. So that's just a hotkey. You're able to use hotkeys from PowerPoint. Alt gets me to the ribbon. S is for slideshow, and C was for current slide. So if you ever lose your place, just a quick way of getting back there. Now I had to be focused on that slide first. So after hitting Alt, you could tab to an item, hit Enter to select a button, and then slip buttons are like submenus. Typically you could hit Enter or space. Space to check or uncheck a checkbox. We're going to look further at these in just a minute. And there's many other control types that we'll talk about with that. So Andrea, how long are we going to break for? Or do we want to talk about questions first?
maybe let's take some questions. Let's go back to Janet's question real quick, or comment. Science teachers make me crazy with their inaccessible PowerPoints that I have to recreate or put into Word. I wish all teachers had to take a class on making accessible PowerPoints.
Yes, I agree with that. It's not just science teachers. It's unfortunately, you know, I don't think teachers don't necessarily need, they're content experts, and that goes for faculty. My dissertation topic was accessibility awareness of online faculty teaching in online classrooms. So this pandemic is really reaching deep into my soul at the moment for that passion of accessibility and online learning. But I feel very strongly that we need to support teachers in understanding how to make accessible content, and they should have access to resources. I do not believe TVI, I know, and I'm going to say this, and some of you may disagree with me, I feel TVIs have enough on their plate. I think TVIs could be a great resource for teachers, but I think there should be additional resources for the classroom teachers and higher education faculty to assist in making the content accessible, or in doing trainings for the general ed teachers and for faculty to help them make sure that their content accessible. They do need that support. Some of the content is more complicated to make accessible than others. My opinion, I just feel strongly that TVIs, you know, you have enough on your plate, and that goes for VRTs and probably everyone else on the call now. But think about how you could support teachers in making the content accessible. The reality that I often see, and Andrea could probably attest to this, is the material is not accessible. And teachers right now have a lot on their plates, because not only do they have to worry about that accessibility, but they're taking their face-to-face content and converting it to online, which is very different, and it should not exactly mirror how you teach in person. It's very different teaching online compared to teaching face-to-face, and the same models, the same learning strategies don't necessarily apply. So teachers need support. I think you as TVIs and professionals in our field and vision studies can help support them. One, I think it's important for you to know how to make documents accessible. I don't think we have a session on that. There's tons of resources available. The AFB session, there's an AFB blog that recently I helped work on, and it has some information on how to make digital content accessible. And the Online Learning Consortium is one of the links that I included in that blog, and they have tons of material to help teachers know how to make content accessible. So the materials are there. WebAIM is a great resource, and I'll stop there, but there's tons of resources out there. Andrea, if you remind me, I could share that link with you for the AFB blog. I think that would be helpful, because it has a whole list of resources that we put together.
That would be fantastic, and that's something I can send out in the email, my follow-up email. And two, this is something FIMC, it's on our radar. We're working closely with fiddlers, so stay tuned. There may be more to come on offerings for gen ed teachers and other teachers to learn more about creating accessible content.
Another thing, if you have worksheets, I have a student I'm working with now who, I'm trying, Andrea, you know who I'm talking about because we've talked, but we're trying to get him, he's with a private school, and they use a lot of workbooks, and he has low vision, but he's really struggling with these workbooks. So for now, until they get set up with FIMC, and maybe this would be a permanent solution, I don't know, but I'm working with his mother and aunt with a couple apps that he could use to take pictures, and then he could do it on his iPad. So one of the apps, and there's so many out there, but one is Adobe Fill-In Sign, where you could type. So you could touch on the worksheet and then type in text. He has a keyboard that he uses, a QWERTY keyboard. And also, I think it's SnapType Pro, I believe that's it. And that one, there's a free version and there's a paid version, but with that one, you're able to draw. So he has a touch pen stylus that he uses, so he's able to do that. So that's working with him for worksheets, but he has low vision. Otherwise, OCR really is going to be the way to go. And then editing and making sure it's accessible, or getting to the original file that is at least somewhat text-based.
Yeah, that's something that's always important, is trying to get to that original file, because if you can at least start with that, you have more of a chance of adding the accessibility in there at the kind of beginning. But of course, it's always best to start with creating an accessible document from the get-go. Tiffany Moore says she struggles with PDF files and getting OCR to scan and read the document. You're muted.
Sorry, it's not going to be perfect no matter what OCR you use. There's really not going to be any magic. If you're able to get the original file that someone used to create the document, if that's possible, try to always go for that. If you can't, it's going to have to be edited manually. There's really no way around that. There's various OCR applications you could try, but there's no quick solution for that.
Elaine says that the closed captioning said indiscernible. What was the name of the app? I think that was the Adobe and the SnapType, maybe. I
believe I think it's SnapType Pro. Let me double check.
SnapType Pro.
Yeah, SNAP. So camel case. It's Snap Type, all one word. You hear my son out there. SnapType Pro. I think it's $4.99 or $5.99 for the paid version. It might be $9.99 at the most. It's not expensive. And Adobe fill-in sign, that's free.
All right, Elaine got it. Thank you.
Another one that you could use, Office Lens. That would be free OCR for documents. That would help you use a smart device just to quickly take a picture of the document. It has OCR built in, but you could also just take that picture. It will format it and make it as clear as possible, put it into a page size image, and then you could save it as a PDF. I think there was something someone said up there about PDF. That PDF, let me just make sure I get. PDF is a rudimentary program, so it is not good for format for anything other than sending through email. I disagree. PDFs can be absolutely fully accessible if they're created properly. I saved my PowerPoint as a PDF, and it is 100% accessible. So it really comes down to the issue with PDFs is not PDF and the format, it's who created it and how accessible they made that document. And often someone will take a picture and call that picture a PDF, and that is it might as well be a JPEG. Donald Hooks is sharing MiniPage is the best. OmniPage is the best for reading PDF. So OmniPage would be an application. Not heard of MiniPage. DocuScan Plus is from Ceratec. OpenBook, Kurzweil 1000, those would be the powerhouses. They're both about $1,000. At this point in time, with so many other options, I think they're a bit overkill. Seeing AI, Envision AI, you have so many options. Those are free. Well, Seeing AI is fully free. So you have a lot of different options.
Kathy, so when creating a PDF, like if you're using Microsoft Word or you're using PowerPoint, for example, Rachel saved all these presentations that she's presenting in PowerPoint as accessible PDFs. It's just making sure everything that you're doing in the original document, when you go to save that document as a PDF, it pulls all of that formatting that you put in there, such as headings, links, and all of that good stuff. This is a big topic, and we could talk for days about creating accessible documents and do a whole